Hello there, short friends. Today I'm going to tell you about these two swords right here. These are two Dha from Siamese Edge. This is a custom variety one that was inspired by a photo that I saw. I asked them to make this one and they did for me. This is a standard grade Dha and it's been customized a little bit. Before I get into the video, a couple quick disclaimers. These are review samples. I got them for free. Think of that what you will. Also, no, I don't know much about the history of Dha. I don't study any martial arts that involve Dha, and I haven't reviewed very many of them on my channel. So take my opinions and musings with a grain of salt as you hear what I have to say. But I should note the aim here is to show you close-ups of the bits and bobs. If you know more about Dha, you will hopefully have some idea of if these things are good or bad. The aim is to show you close-ups. I'll move it, I'll use it, I'll talk about the experience. If you are a more experienced martial artist, incidentally, I would welcome your feedback about what you think about these things. If you study the systems that would involve a Dha like either of these. Also, if you are just a sword enthusiast collector, well, I've got good news for you. This is going to be a favorable review. These are very fun swords, and I don't play with Dha very often, but having experienced these two, that may change. These are very, very fun swords, and I could certainly endorse them if you are looking for a fun sword and you don't know much about Dha. These are pretty fun things. And if you have a project in mind, there's some more nuance I'll talk about with this one up here. Anyway, I'm going to move on with the review. The idea here, again, is just to show you close-ups of the bits and bobs. I'll move it around a little bit. I'll cut some things, debatably abusive, not too much. They initially sent this one to me to destroy, the standard grade one, and this one to kind of keep around and use an example in future videos. I have not broken it for two reasons. One, it's very cold outside, and it's not fun to lose chunks of blades in the snow where my kids play. Also, it's a differentially hardened blade, and it's going to be destroyed relatively quickly if I put it through the kind of abusive testing you've seen me do. So I did do some abusive things. You'll see them later, but I really don't think it's going to last very long. If you're compelled to see me destroy it, though, let me know in the comments down below. If need be, I will push it to failure. I'm just relatively confident in saying that if I start trying to break it, it will break relatively easily. But that doesn't mean it's a weak or silly blade. Differentially hardened blades hold an edge well. They stayed reasonably straight. It's not an undurable thing. It's just the nature of its construction is such that if I hit it on a metal pole in my backyard, it's going to break relatively quickly. Anyway, on with the bits and bobs and fits and features. I'm going to talk about both of them, and I'm going to start at the end bits here, and then I'm going to move my way down. Before I do, if I haven't mentioned it already, the price, this would be about 28,000 baht, which in today's money is a little over $800, or maybe well over $800. It bounces around a little bit. This guy would be 18,000 baht in its current configuration. It's a little different. It has some additional adornments on the scabbard. I'm not sure what else may have changed, but it's a little more expensive than the standard grade one at a little over $500 when I checked the currency exchange. Anyway, moving on, going to the top, the base model here, the simple or basic one, has this little domed cap with what looks like a peen on it. Now, I don't know the method of construction here. I don't know how the tangs look because I haven't broken them apart. And I don't think this is an actual peen because it's copper. So I suspect that whatever is holding the handle together is down here, and this is more or less to hold the copper furniture on. It has a kind of hammered look to it, a handmade rusticness to it, but at the same time it's got detailing and refinement. I happen to really like this little dome shape here, and also it fit really well and was very comfortable to hold in my hand. I used it outside in a glove to cut with, but I swung it around a bit on the inside, and I've had it for a while in warmer weather. It doesn't hurt my hand. Nothing is uncomfortable or jarring. If I move up to the silver variety up here, well, this is a little different. So I should preface as well that I sent a photo of a Dha that I saw online because they offered to make a custom variety one. And they kind of said, hey, tell us what you'd like. I sent them a photo of a Dha that I thought looked really cool. And then I said, make something as close to that as you can. But I didn't ask, what are your capabilities? What can you do? What will it look like? I just said something like that. And so this is what I got. I'll talk about that a little bit later at the end, but it is a little different than the original photo that I saw. It's not uncomfortable. It has, it's nice, but it lacks the kind of doming at the end. And I think there's less options available with the silver work that they do in comparison to the copper. I don't exactly know why, but something about it, they said they couldn't do the kind of rounding copper bit that the Dha that I had sent a photo of had. What I do see here, though, is I can make out some seams here and there. There's a little bit of roughness to the silver, but there's also lots of little detail and lots of little adornments that are put in here. It's zhuzhed up and zazzy in a way that I can appreciate. Now, it's not as elaborate as some of the Very, very intricately done Da, but at the same time, there's, you know, some wires and some stuff on here to add beauty, add a little texture, and I happen to like that. The next thing to talk about is the grip, the section here. So the base model here is what wrapped in what appears to be a cordage, and it seems very similar to European handles. It's not quite the same thing. It's like a lacquered cord as opposed to leather that's wrapped in cord. Now it is lacquered though as well. I believe it's lacquered or has some sort of sealant on it. So this has like a very fine sandpaper feel to it. It grabs my hand. It's not tacky. It's very familiar. It feels very solid in the hand. I've no complaints, incidentally, about this grip, and it didn't come loose. Nothing wiggled or jiggled, and it was very comfortable in the hand. This is also, well, all of them are very round, except as on the standard grade one, it feels not quite elliptical, but I can index it a little easier. The custom variety one has a round handle, which is historically correct. At the same time, I don't really like round handles. They're harder to index. It's harder to get your edge alignment exactly where you want. It's historically correct, but something that if I could do it again, I might ask for some modifications or changes on. Round handles are not my thing. As it is, this has grooves and levels and all sorts of cool stuff on it. And that there's little dips and valleys, and then there's these little recesses or grooves that are carved in. What it amounts to, though, is something, a wood handle that feels very comfortable in my hand and gives me a very solid grip. It doesn't move around, whether I'm in a glove, whether I'm in a bare hand. It feels very solid in my hand. I used it outside in the snow. Nothing froze to my hand incidentally as well, so solid metal handles can be a bear when you're operating in cold temperatures. And it felt overall quite solid. As I move up, though, to this cross-guardy area, the fitting on the custom one here is a little different. Now I can move it around is one thing, and then on the other side, it has come loose a little bit from some of the cutting that I've done. There's a little spacer or something that has kind of come undone or unsoldered. I'll point out that Thailand is a very warm weather climate, and I am operating and cutting outside when it is well below zero. I believe on one of the days I brought it out, it was like 22 below zero outside my house. So there's been some temperature changes that have happened, and the only fitting that has come a little loose is this silver one, and all it is I can kind of wiggle it around. Whatever adhesive was in here has loosened up ever so slightly. I can't get any vertical play, but I can twist it a little bit, and then this ledge here has popped out slightly. So there have been some, it has diminished a little bit, but I don't think any of it was from the cutting that I did. I believe all of it was from the temperature change, and that is unfortunately something that happens with a number of swords that I've brought into my collection. The tensions and lots of things that are tight tend to really struggle when I break them, when I bring them outside in the winter and do some aggressive cutting with them. I also spend a fair amount of time outside as well, and like the water freezes to the blades and all that kind of stuff. On this handle, though, the same little area has the same rounding as the end here, and it doesn't do much to prevent your hand from sliding up, but there is a little bit of stop there. It also widens out a little bit. There's a little bit of a catch here to keep your hand from sliding up, which it becomes very sharp very quickly here. So I wouldn't mind a little more hand protection, but at the same time, or not necessarily hand protection, because I don't think cross guards or hand or disc guards or anything like that are particularly common in Dha. There are some examples with them, but not in this particular style. As it is, if there was just something a little bit more of a flare to keep my guard from breaking if I was doing any thrusting, wasn't really a problem though. And also this is very grippy in a sense that if I want to take it out and thrust with it, I don't feel like I'm going to lose it or it's going to get away from me. I also just like the design on this sword. The hilt overall is just very handsome. This doming here with the little what looks like a peen, it's all held together reasonably well. The way the copper is flared, it's kind of hand hammered and just has a rustic but charm to it that I don't see in many swords. The way this particular guard recesses in this pocket or something like that with the standard Dha is interesting as well. So a little push and that guard recesses in the handle. It doesn't then fall out, but a quick pull will release it. So it's tensioned really well. It keeps water and whatnot out, I would imagine, and it's a nuance and something interesting that I don't often see done on swords, and was kind of charming to see done here. Looks very handmade and pretty well executed, so tip of my hat there. moving to the scabbards, I'm going to talk again more about this standard grade unit. So the wood, I can't remember what they said it's made from, but it's made out of a local wood, and they mentioned the name, but I couldn't recall the translation. It doesn't seem to like Minnesota weather, though. There are some splits and things like that from being outside, but they weren't present before I brought them out in the very cold weather. And then the way it's shaped is interesting. It thickens up here and tapers down, which is what I've seen on historic Dha, and I don't see very often on reproductions. If I see a Dha reproduction, oftentimes there's not as much nuance or taper in the scabbards. There's also these copper fittings that blend in with the wood, and they have little, wire twisty bits on them that keep them, add a little bit of texture and add a little bit of decoration. I love the way this looks. It's very, very cool in terms of appearance. It has a charm. I like the cabling, this back strap or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I like it. It's different and not something that I've seen before. And it also fits, it doesn't rattle, and I can deploy it. It holds the sword well. It seems a very well-made thing. And so I like this scabbard in particular, and I like the overall way this presentation looks. It's really well thought out. What I can't say is that this one is. So scabbard-wise, it doesn't have the same little pocket, and seeing a round handle that goes into an ovoid shape is visually jarring to me, but probably historically accurate and all that, and something I will take on as my own fault. I didn't know their capabilities. I didn't know what to order. I said make something that looks like this, and I don't think I gave much an indication on the scabbard. They put little brass ringlets around it, and unfortunately some of them have come loose. Again, this is a facet of the cold weather. This one didn't split in the weather, but the adhesive that keeps these down has come loose, and now I can kind of wiggle them around a bit. And so that is also a bit of a disappointment. It looked great on the wall, but once I brought it out in the cold, I can kind of move these around a little bit. And before, they were very tight and very tense. Now I can kind of scoot them up about an inch and from their previous location or more, and then they kind of lock into place. But they can still serve their original purpose, but I would need more adhesive or to move them to a different location to have them really function as intended. Again, the shaping is great. It thins out down here. It widens out to meet this transition here. I don't, again, like the ovoid. It's kind of jarring, this thing to me, but that is a subjective me thing. The blade still doesn't fall out. It doesn't rattle. This, despite, this stuff moving around, is a really, really well-crafted scabbard. I'll give some allowance for these things moving around. This is stuff that I find irritating, but again, was not a problem in warm weather, became a problem when I brought it out into very, very cold weather. All right, sword friends, I'm going to talk about the blade, the pointy, stabby part. And first off, both of them have a very similar shape. The standard one is a little bit longer than the custom variety. Obviously, they could make different sizes depending on your need. They're both made of the same steel, but one is obviously finished in a more mirror kind of satiny look. The other has done a very, very heavy acid etch. Both of them are differentially hardened and feature a similar pattern on the edge here. So differential hardening, meaning that the spine, the back part, is softer than the edge part. I don't know if Dha historically were typically done in a differential hardening manner. Most of the pictures that I see don't show it, but that doesn't mean that it isn't there. Obviously, this one is much harder to see than this one. It's brought out with an acid etch. I happen to really like this acid etched looking blade though. The kind of modern looking handle to my eye, as well as this very, very bold and prominent differential hardening area here, is visually very, very pleasing to me. I like that it thins out. It's also just one giant wedge shape all the way along it. Worth calling out though, that the folks at Siamese Edge know how to incorporate distal taper. So this blade thins out. I'll include dimensions in the description down below for those of you that are interested. But very often some manufacturers that are selling swords for 500 bucks have one thick bar and they differentially harden it, and it looks a thing, but it doesn't feel a thing. This incorporates some challenges of sword making that I'm very delighted to see the folks at Siamese Edge do well. This feels excellent in the hand, and a big part of it has to do with their knowledge of how to thin out blades in the right way to make them feel and deliver this kind of feeling and joy in the hand. So it looks very pretty, but it's also made with competence. Along the edge, I can make out like the spine of the blade is very consistent. There's not a lot of ripples in the surface, though I do make out a fair bit of tool marks underneath here. So it looks like when they sanded it and polished it up, the acid has brought out a fair bit of tool marking here. It's not something that I'm really going to complain about. It's not a particularly expensive sword. At the same time, it's worth noting, if you were expecting perfection, there's not perfection here. There is a lot of diligent handwork, but there's definitely a human element. There's flaws in it that are more or less everywhere. Little dings from hammer marks and whatnot in the fittings, little spots where the threads don't line up perfectly, little spots where I can make out a tool mark. But generally speaking, it's still quite refined work. On the custom variety, again, a similar shape but smaller and also lighter. This is like a stick in your hand. You don't feel it. It instantly becomes a part of your hand, and that is tip of my hat. It's hard to do that with a sword. This feels absolutely excellent in the hand. The only sword that comes to mind that I've had similar feelings for is like the Royal Arsenal Dha from LK Chen, where just you picked it up and it felt like a stick, like you're playing in the backyard or at a playground with a stick you found on the ground, and it's just part of your arm. This feels kind of the same. It just moves effortlessly. The downside is I can't index it. It does feel a little bit like a stick in that way. The weight gives me some idea of where the edge is. At the same time, I wouldn't mind if this gave me a little help along the way. The finish work on here is a little bit more pristine, so you can make out some scuffs and whatnot, but there's a satin finish which is close to a mirror finish. The secondary bevel is there a little bit, but much harder to see. It's also differentially hardened, but you don't make that out as easily. And there aren't a lot of surface ripples or anything in the sword. Everything is straight. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. The craft work on here, I think, is really overall quite good. This, in terms of design, doesn't look like exactly what I asked them to make. At the same time, I wasn't very specific, and what they delivered is something absolutely wonderful in the hand. So if I close my eyes, it's just an excellent and fun feeling sword. Anyway, as I talk about fun feeling, I should talk about how they move around. Now, hearing somebody talk about how they move around and how they feel in the hand when they don't study how they're supposed to feel and doesn't have a lot of relevant experience, I can't imagine is terribly useful. If you're wondering how they feel, though, from the standpoint of a person who doesn't play with Dha very often and just likes fun swords, they feel really fantastic, and I definitely encourage you to try one. From a cutting standpoint, that's maybe a little bit more useful. And before I show you cutting, I do want to preface, I'm cutting on a very cold day, and I'm kind of lazy right now. I'm recovering from sickness. I don't want to be out in the cold very much. And the water bottles that I have are partially frozen. So all of them have like basically a core of an ice cube. These are half water bottle, half ice cube, which makes them kind of abusive. Cutting water bottles isn't something that I would say is abusive in general, but cutting through the thick neck of water bottle has deflected and chipped edges in the past. Also, cutting ice cubes or ice blocks is known to be a hard thing to do. Cutting in the cold, I also find, breaks blades quicker. So if there are fractures or things like that, again, I'm operating at a temperature that is well below zero. Water is freezing the blades very quickly. I can't even wipe it off before they become ice cubes. If there were really bad problems, they would manifest a little bit more quickly in the cold. So how did they cut? Great is the short answer. They cut through all the water bottles without any issue whatsoever, like they weren't even there. I'm surprised at how good the edge alignment was. I was surprised at how sticky they were in my hands. I didn't feel them turn or twist. I didn't have any problem with them moving around despite being wet, despite having snow on my hands, any of that kind of stuff. They were glued to my hand pretty well. So I thought that was nice. They cut well. There was no issue with the edge. They were extraordinarily sharp. They're kind of all like about shaving sharp and just moved through all of the targets quite well. There were a couple bits of plastic that more shattered than cut, but that might also be because it's cold and they're a particularly brittle kind of plastic. That said, with most of the cuts, I found that they were easy to control. I felt like I could get the tip where I wanted it to. I felt like I could cut the bottles, generally speaking, with reasonable aim, and they cut really, really, really well, making them, well, fun to cut with. When the bottles, it's pretty rare for me to cut a water bottle and have the base sitting there, and I don't think it's just because the base was freezing to the stand. It might have been, but I got a few cuts where the base was sitting there. The custom variety also cut exceptionally well. It cut better. It's thinner and just moved and sailed through the targets. I, again, was surprised that I didn't have much problem with edge alignment. I was also surprised that it didn't turn in my hand. I was expecting it to do that a little bit, especially when really flung it out there. All of them also cut really well without a lot of effort. They're very sharp, they move very, very quickly, and I didn't feel like I really had to really do much to deliver a very effective cut on a water bottle, or a water bottle with chunks of ice in it. Also, none of them are bent. So I did a couple cursory whacks on the garbage can, not on the stand, but on a garbage can. All of them have maintained their shape and stayed straight. All of them have no damage to the edge whatsoever. And I did try to nip at the necks of water bottles where they're thicker. I also tried to cut into, like I said, there's a big chunk of ice in a lot of the middle of these bottles because they were frozen and thawed and frozen and thawed because I don't have a heater in my garage. All right, sword friends, before I move on to the final thoughts part, I do want to talk a little bit about some comparisons. So I have the Banshee, which is a Hanwei product that was made some time ago. I don't know if these are going to be around anymore, but this is one of the few Dha that was on the market. And when I reviewed this sword, I mentioned that it feels great. It puts a smile on my face. It feels nimble and agile. Both of these swords kind of put this one to shame in terms of how nimble and agile they feel. They are both longer, maybe thinner, but at the same time, like I feel like I can get the tip where I want. I feel like I can cut with it. Both of them were more effective cutters as well. Now, this is a through-hardened blade. It's going to stand up to punishment better by nature of that. At the same time, in terms of feelings, I think the Siamese Edge blades are superior feeling to a blade that I've given praise before to how it feels. I like this sword quite a lot. These feel even better than the Hanwei Banshee. Incidentally, I have heard reviews of the Hanwei Banshee where people have said the handle's quite narrow. These are a little bigger than the Hanwei Banshee, but not by much. They are, at least the standard grade one is a narrow handle. The other one that I have is a antique Dha, or at least what I believe is an antique Dha, not a particularly high-end variety one. In terms of shape, they have similar shapes where they're narrow, and at the base it has distal taper, but the antique has one notable difference, and that is that this is a lenticular cross-section, and that the center is basically has a swell in it, and then it tapers down at the edge and at the spine. These have almost like a katana type spine or a knife type spine where the spine is relatively thick and it's one wedge shape. These are lenticular in terms of shape where the middle has a swell in it. This one also has like surface cracking on it. I'd be kind of terrified to cut much with it. I can't tell if it's differentially hardened or not. What I can say though is shape-wise, they're very similar. Feeling-wise, this is also very, very light. And I feel like in spirit, this is kind of capturing the spirit of what these antiques are supposed to feel like, or what a Dha is supposed to feel like. I much prefer the feeling of the Siamese Edge to the antique, which is not always the case. Sometimes I like the feeling of antiques more, but the way it's constructed and also the fact that it's new and I'm less nervous about moving it around is a credit to the Siamese Edge. But the point is, they are looking, generally speaking, similar. In terms of the scabbards, they again have a similar shape where it tapers down. There's a lot of variety in the way Dha can be made, but I think the folks at Siamese Edge, at least to my understanding, have captured the way that they're supposed to feel. This one's just fun. Anyway, sword friends, you've seen some comparisons. You've seen close-ups of the bits and bobs and fits and features. You've seen me cut with it, talk about moving it around. Hopefully at this point, you have enough information to decide if they're worth your hard-earned money or not. Again, being around $500 and around $800. It's time for me to answer that question myself, though. Do I personally think they're worth it? Yeah, is the short answer. Absolutely. This one in particular, the standard Dha, is really the standout. It visually is striking and interesting to have as a piece in my collection. In terms of cutting, it is delightful to move around and fun. It puts a smile on my face, and it has like a human but quality crafted element to it that really, really vibes with me. I absolutely adore this one, and I could easily recommend it to anyone who's thinking about getting a Dha or just looking for a sword that's fun. The next one to talk about is this customized piece here. Do I think this is worth the over $800 that's being asked? Well, yes. I'm a little disappointed in it, but first I'll talk about the nice parts. You can get a custom Dha inspired by a historical piece made for $800 by competent people that feels delightful in the hand. That in and of itself, I think, represents a pretty solid value. This one, granted, has some wiggly fittings in a piece that opened up a little bit. At the same time, the blade feels good. It cut exceptionally well, and Minnesota winters are brutal. I think it's a good value. This one, though, I'm a little disappointed by, and I learned a lesson when somebody offers to make you a custom sword to be a little bit more specific about the recipe to make you happy. I didn't know much about Dha. I found a photo of one that looked like something I would like, and I said, make something as close to this as you can easily, and this is what I got. I can see the inspiration, but some of the parts on the Dha, on the photo that I sent, aren't here in a way that I thought they would be. I like the doming on the handle. I like the kind of white look of the handle as well. This wood handle is really well done, but it doesn't have the visual look that I was looking for. The blade as well was longer, and it had a fuller in it, and it reminded me basically of like as close as a Dha could be to a katana, right? And so I thought that would be familiar. I thought it'd be a fun example. This has artistry and detail and value in it. At the same time, it's just not visually as captivating as the photo that I sent. So is it close to that? No. But if I had said, here are the specific things I'm looking for in a Dha, can you make those? The experience probably would have been very different. So if you have an idea for a custom Dha, just be sure that you have it refined so that you can communicate that. Give them a recipe to make you happy. I'm sure that the experience would probably be better. If you say, you know, get as close to this as you can, I don't know that I would be entirely disappointed if I did that. At the same time, this feels like a completely different sword. A delightful sword that on its own merits, I think is probably worth the 800 bucks. But based on that photo, it's just not quite what I had envisioned in my head. So again, I'll take the responsibility for that. At the same time, this tells me that the folks at Siamese Edge know how to make swords and know how to make very fun and delightful feeling swords on a reasonable budget. $500 for this guy is not nothing. At the same time, I can't think of a lot of swords for $500 that you pick up and just delight you. There's been a few of them, but it's a rarity, and this is absolutely one of them. So this standard one is the one that kind of gets a glowing recommendation from me. This has been so much fun, and I'm glad I didn't break it. I'm glad I get to cut stuff with it some more. Anyway, if you're interested in seeing how much punishment it can take, let me know. I think with a differentially hardened edge, it probably won't last long against the croquet stake of doom, but I can, when the weather warms up, take it against some more abusive targets, some wood, some lumber, when it's not a near perpetual ice cube outside. All right, sword friends, that's all I've got. Hopefully it's been an interesting video. I want to thank the folks at Siamese Edge for sending these my way. I'll link them again in the description down below if you're interested in getting one. Cheers, and thanks for watching.